I'm Jason King, the Byrne Chair and Director for the Center for Catholic Studies at St. Mary's University. In today's episode, I talk with Dr. Amanda Baugh, Professor of Religious Studies at California State University, Northridge. She came to St. Mary's as part of the McTaggart Catholic Intellectual Tradition lecture series to share insights from her book, Falling in Love with Nature, The Values of Latinx Catholic Environmentalism. We talked about her past, how she got into environmentalism, its impact on Catholic thought today, and the future of Catholic higher education. Welcome to Beyond the Lecture.
Welcome, Amanda. Thanks for coming to campus. Welcome to Beyond the Lecture. I wanted to start off by talking just about how you got into your field, how you got into religious studies.
Yeah. So I grew up here in San Antonio.
Yay!
So I'm excited to be back. Thank you for bringing me here. And so I actually grew up, I guess, in an interfaith family. My mom is Jewish, and my dad, his family is Methodist. And we did various holidays, but we weren't especially religious in anything. And then I went to college at Hendrix College in Conway, Arkansas. And I was biology pre-med for a long time. But for my gen ed requirements, my mom really wanted me to take Intro to Judaism to kind of, I think she felt like it would teach me all the things that she thought she was supposed to teach me. And as a prereq for that, they encouraged the world religions class. And so I took that. And
just part of their core curriculum requirements.
And I had a wonderful professor who was actually ABD. She was a pretty new professor and just super enthusiastic. And every week she'd say like, "Oh, we just spent a week on Buddhism, but you could take a whole course on Buddhism." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds pretty good." And then we studied Islam. She's like, "We just spent 2 weeks on Islam, but you could take a whole class." So I was kind of sitting there and enjoying all of those.
So kind of opening doors for you.
For sure. And then meanwhile, even though I was biology pre-med, I found out I was really bad at biology. And so I kind of had a transition where I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had a small period where I was doing environmental studies. But it was my dad, it was the summer before my junior year. And my dad was asking me like what I was most excited about in terms of the classes, and it was the religious studies ones in the kind of environmental studies field. And so he kind of encouraged me to just go ahead and take the classes that I liked.
Oh, that's amazing. Like I've done a couple of these interviews. It's amazing how many people start somewhere else and kind of discover religion afterwards.
Oh, for sure.
I was a math major, and I did computer stuff, and I kind of liked it, but I remember this moment of one of my professors just talking about how much he loved math, and I was like, I don't have that, but I want that. And so I spent I did a year of service work afterwards trying to figure out what is the things that I love to do. What was I sort of reading afterwards?
That's cool. I had the same realization in biology. I think I was in zoology, and we were studying the segments of an earthworm, and I had a realization that some people find that really interesting, and I'm not one of them. So
I had a good friend, and she loves biology. She was a biology professor, and she was like, "Bacteria is so interesting," and I'm like, "Okay," that's the calling. That just sort of comes up, and the things that fascinate and grip you. I don't know why everybody's not in theology or religion, but obviously there's different people in the world.
Totally.
How did you get from San Antonio to Arkansas? Is that what you said?
So I was looking at small liberal arts schools, and so I kind of looked at Trinity here and Southwestern. I was a softball player, and those were small schools where I could play softball. And actually my brother he played baseball at Lyon College in Arkansas. He got recruited to play there, and he had a tournament at Hendrix, and I think my parents went to it and walked around and thought I'd like it. And then it was one of those things, I did the college tours and just kind of fell in love with that place. I felt at home there. So
did you play softball in college?
I did, yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Do you still play at all? Or?
No, but I have two sons that are big baseball players, so I know how to throw a baseball now. You hold it with 2 fingers, not 3, I just learned.
I played soccer and played in college, and then my kids are playing, my youngest son's playing, is the last one to play, so it's been kind of fun.
Nice.
It's a fun experiment.
Yeah.
So after college, how did you go?
I ended up going to Chicago, and I went to grad school at Northwestern.
Did you, and by then, it sounded like in your undergraduate you already had an interest in environmentalism as well as the religion. Did you explore that still in graduate school?
So in my interest in religious studies, the world religions class kind of helped, but it was really so one of my main undergrad professor was Jay McDaniel, who's also from San Antonio, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
But I met him at Hendrix College, and he was kind of one of the early people, kind of one of the foundational figures in religion and ecology, kind of starting in the 90s. So it was, even if his class wasn't a religion and ecology class, it totally was.
Yeah.
So my interest in religious studies was always tied to environment. And so I switched to religious studies too late. I kind of decided to pursue a grad degree too late to do it right after college. But kind of my senior year, I was thinking that that's what I wanted to do. And I was looking around at programs. I had some friends that were moving to Chicago. So I kind of just went there and hung out for a year and applied to grad schools. And then, so I found at the Northwestern program, I worked with Sarah McFarland Taylor, who she published a book called Green Sisters. She's one of the environment people. So I went there to work with her.
That's really cool. I haven't thought about this, but do you see a connection then between religions in the sense of like worldviews and environmentalism? Like to me, in my mind, there's a kind, just when you mention that, a kind of connection there. Like if you're thinking about all of creation or all of universe, thinking about care, that also seems to have a kind of natural disposition to religions or worldviews as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the field of religion and ecology kind of started in the 90s, looking at the ways religious traditions and texts and ethics and theologies can support kind of a positive environmental ethic. And kind of the debate of are religions helping us go green, or are they actually the cause of anti-environmental values? But then kind of my generation after, that was kind of the beginning, and then we kind of look more at, there's still people doing text and theology, of course. But then but where I fit in is more kind of thinking about, what do people actually do with those texts? To what extent do they shape their values and worldviews? But I think absolutely, people view the world around them through a religious lens, and then the field also kind of looks at environmentalism as a religion for folks that have that aren't affiliated with traditional or institutional religions. Kind of how Bron Taylor is a big person. He looks at like surfing spirituality and stuff like that. So kind of nature-based practices as religion.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I know I want to talk about where you go from sort of graduate school, but it struck me. I'm originally from Kentucky. Which is an interesting sort of environment, and then it's very different than San Antonio here. My wife's from Wisconsin, which is a very different kind of ecosystem, and so we've been kind of marveling at this place on various hikes and parks and things. And so I'm thinking about you going from San Antonio, which is sunny and stuff, to Chicago, which is not sunny. I spent a year there, and there was like 90 days without direct sunlight. And then now you're in LA, right? Like, so can you speak a little bit about those different, or if those have any impact on your thinking, just those different environmental contexts?
I will say Chicago was the first place I lived where I actually always knew where like north and west was, because the lake's always to the east. So that was nice, kind of having that big geographical feature there. But no, my first year in Chicago, I was working. I was like a preschool teacher, and it was terrible because it would be dark when I went to work, and then it would be dark when I left. Like the days were short and it was gray.
I was doing middle school. It's the same thing.
But I loved Chicago. It was cool at the beach. But the winter was very rough, and I largely stayed inside. And now I get to be in a place where, I love LA because like my kids' school, it's outside. Like the door is open to the outside. The lockers, the hallway is outdoors. So I love being in a place where, I actually sit and work in my backyard a lot of the times when I work from home, and it's all year long. It's really nice. I will say that was another thing that kind of, when I was an undergrad, kind of thinking like, do I want to pursue academia? I saw some professors at Hendrix having a meeting by the turtle pond. And I was like, that seems like a pretty nice life. And I reflected on that recently because at CSUN, where I work at Cal State Northridge, I went to an event, and we have a big sustainability food garden, and I went to an event there, and I had a faculty meeting on Zoom. So I just like left the garden. I had my computer, and I had my faculty meeting, like 10 feet from the garden. I was like, this is what I was dreaming of, and it's really nice. So I love being somewhere where I get to be outdoors a lot and enjoy the sunshine.
I know when I was interviewing down here, because we were living in Pittsburgh, or outside of Pittsburgh at the time, and I didn't realize it, but it's the second cloudiest area of the country after like the Washington, Portland area. And when I interviewed down here, they're like, oh yeah, it's like 300 days of sunlight.
Yeah.
And I told my wife, she's like, you can't take a job because of the sunlight. And I'm like, I
Yeah,
might.
I think you can.
I might.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I had a similar experience when I interviewed at Cal State Northridge because I was in Chicago and it was in December, and I remember it was like the first snow of Chicago, and I went out to Cal State Northridge. It was beautiful and sunny. We have an orange grove. And our office doors also opened outside, and there was like ivy growing everywhere, and it was a similar, because I was at CSUN, we have a heavy teaching load, and coming there from grad school, I was not sure about that, but then once I was on the campus, I was like, okay, I can teach however many classes you want for for this weather. So.
Say more about that transition. Were you finished with your doctorate going there, or were you taking the job and then kind of finishing up?
Yeah, so it was, I really wasn't ready to apply for jobs yet, but this one was like written for me, basically. It wasn't actually written for me.
But all the things that you're interested in.
Because a lot of the jobs back then, I was hired in 2012. A lot of the jobs were more for ethicists or textual tradition type positions. But this one, they wanted somebody that could teach religion in the United States, and that's my PhD is actually in American religions. So it was kind of, there weren't actually that many people at that time doing religion and environment from an American religions position. So I actually had only written like 2 chapters in my dissertation, and you have to you can't be hired until you're fully PhD. And so, but I went ahead and applied, and I went to the interview and loved it, and I ended up getting the position. And then I got super lucky because I didn't actually think I was going to get the job, so I was applying for dissertation fellowships. And I got a dissertation fellowship for the next year, and CSUN let me defer my position so I could finish. So it was like the dream. It was nice.
That's perfect. That worked out perfect. That's really nice. I know that doesn't happen to a lot of people, but it should. And so it's nice to hear that it does.
Yeah, for sure.
And so you spent like a year then writing the dissertation, and then you get to start this
exactly.
job. So what all do you teach there?
I do our Intro to Religious Studies class, Religion in the United States, American Religious Diversity, and our theory and method. Oh, and religion and ecology. Oh, which we just changed the name. It's going to be religion and environmental justice now. And then also, about a year and a half ago, I took over. I'm the director of our master's degree in sustainability, and I teach the thesis class for those students. So it's their second year. It's a 2-semester class where they do their thesis projects.
You sound like every person at a small college. I do this and this and and this.
Yes.
And this thing too. And I run this thing.
Exactly.
And they're all wonderful things, but you're spinning around. So
exactly, for sure. I send a lot of emails.
I know. I'm like trying. Emails can eat up so much time, and then I like to check things off lists. So my problem is that I'll like answer all these emails, and then I haven't checked anything off my list, so I feel like I haven't done anything, which I have. But, I want something a little more concrete as well. So now I want to talk about sort of your book. How did that emerge in this sort of context? Because that's more research on top of everything else.
Yeah, so I mean, it emerged because it emerged through my teaching. So when I first got to CSUN, I was revising my dissertation into a book, that was my first book, God in the Green Divide. That was published in 2016. So the first few years there, I was working on that, but I was also teaching this religion and ecology class to CSUN students, which was an amazing opportunity because we're a Hispanic serving institute, just like St. Mary's, and we have a huge population of first-generation college students. I think 70% or so are eligible for Pell Grants.
Gotcha.
The vast majority are the first in their families to attend college. So they're bringing this really great perspective to all of these issues. But anyway, so I came from Northwestern, and I mean, anybody going straight from grad school to a teaching position, you have no idea what you're doing. But my first semester, I designed this class that was my religion and ecology class was gen ed, no prereqs. And I essentially had designed like a graduate seminar in religion and ecology. Yes. But like my students were delightful, and they kind of were,
humored you.
They humored me and everything. But I kind of like learned that the stuff that I was bringing, they're fine, they're polite, whatever, but it wasn't really engaging with them and kind of their orientations with the material. And basically, I talk about this in my book a little bit. We did was maybe my third year of teaching at CSUN, and I was kind of learning that my students did all these things that I consider environmental, but they didn't call them environmentalism, like recycling, recycle cans. Some of my students would insist, oh, well, we do that for the money, not for the environment, so that's not environmentalism.
Yeah.
But so we did this carbon footprint journal exercise where students take a ecological footprint quiz online, and then they kind of write a reflection saying what their footprint is and how they ought to improve it. And so I did it also and ready for this class discussion, and like most of them had very low carbon footprints, and we're kind of like, I don't really need to do a whole lot to improve them. And then of course, I had the highest carbon footprint.
I'm flying around to conferences.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that was just kind of a big
that's really interesting.
paradigm shift, I think, for all of us, and kind of recognizing that my students are the experts in, sustainable living. And just, so anyway, basically having conversations with the students and learning that there's, amazing orientations to sustainable living and environmentalism that aren't labeled as such and that aren't really written about. So that was, a big important thing. And then also, I wanted to do an undergrad research project. And so we worked with a center at CSUN that basically works with a particular neighborhood near campus. And we were doing kind of a needs survey assessment to kind of see how they could partner with this organization, but also while we were there, we asked them about environmental issues. And so that was kind of like one piece, just kind of getting out into the field and hearing people's perspectives on environmentalism. And then at the same time, there was a survey that came out with the Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, in 2014, looking at environmental values and religious identity. And it found that Hispanic Catholics cared more than anybody, and white Catholics cared the least.
Wow.
Yeah. And then also that was right before Laudato Si. So all of these things, like we're doing this kind of, that was right before. It was the fall before Laudato Si. So I had this class project where we were kind of doing these focus groups, and then the survey comes out. We're like, oh, we should probably look at Catholics, what's going on there. And then especially once by like March of 2015, people knew that the Pope was going to be coming out with this encyclical on climate change and the environment. So all of those were just kind of like good reasons to talk to Catholics.
That's such that you're talking about sort of the paradigm shift. And that was one of the things I really enjoyed about the book, which is this sense we have, sometimes, especially as academics, we bring a certain framework in, that this is the thing, and then you start to talk to people and you're like, oh, it's also this thing and this thing and this, and it's so much bigger than what you sort of did. But it oftentimes comes through encounters, and this is why I love teaching at small places, because you have those discussions and you discover these things from your students that are totally unexpected, and then they start to shift your whole thing about that. So that's the piece that I liked, and then your sort of movement then out to talk to sort of people. So maybe talk a little bit about that out into the parishes, how you kind of went from the students out into the community to talk about how they're thinking about it, and how that also expands this understanding. Because one of the stories that you brought it up earlier is like you started to shift the language and how you approach. Like I kind of come talk to you about A, and you're like, oh, that's not working. Let me talk to you about something else.
Yeah, for sure. So having had those conversations with my students in the classroom is what enabled me to talk to priests and convince them that I should, come meet people from their parish. So there was one in particular. It was a large, predominantly Spanish-speaking church, I don't know, about 20 minutes from our campus. And we decided to go there. And I brought some of my students to meet with a priest. So we set up a meeting to kind of see, tell him about the research project and see if he might be willing to help us recruit people from his parish to participate in a focus group. And I told him I was interested in environmental issues and Catholicism. And at first he said, oh, I don't think that we're going to have, I don't think the people here are that interested in that. But I had my students there from the class, and I said, oh, okay, well, when I said that, environment, they weren't that interested. But then we talked about, recycling and how they use public transit, and, how their grandmas have taught them to, just reuse containers, like yogurt containers, instead of buying Tupperware and things like that. And then it was like, aha, yes, like he knew exactly what we were talking about. He said, okay, I understand what you're talking about. And he was actually really huge for us because, I was going to do all of the research in English. But he said, I can set you up with an English-speaking group, but if you really want to hear the stories you're looking for, you need to speak with our parishioners in Spanish. So we it was a class project. We did the English language focus group as the class project, and then I had several bilingual students help me do a focus group in Spanish, and that really shaped it. So yeah, it was basically, I think if I hadn't had the conversations with my students, then I wouldn't have known what to say when I went out to the community. So they were kind of the first ones to that let me know that there's this whole world and this whole set of conversations that I was completely unaware of.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. So tell me, I know it's in the book, but say a little bit about the things that you discovered as you were doing those sort of focus group and brings everything together.
Yeah. So that first one, it was with the Spanish speakers. I talk about this in the book a little bit, but so I have this PhD in studying religion and the environment. I've read all these books, there's the Harvard series, and they say that that there's all these environmental resources and texts, but I was still shocked when I went to this focus group, and they said, from the moment we believe in God, we love all of God's creation. From the moment we read the Bible, we care about all of the living things. And they said exactly what I was expecting from those books. But that particularly that focus group with the Spanish-speaking churchgoers, I think maybe one had a college degree, and a couple had finished high school, and a lot of them, maybe only made it through elementary school. They didn't have the opportunity to go to school after that. And that, just from my experiences in the environmental movement growing up, that's just not the population that you see, at an anti-nuclear rally or what, right? And so I was actually, pretty surprised to find that there. But basically, so a lot of expressions just of love for nature, and love for nature that surrounds us as part of everyday life. So, kind of with the history of the modern environmental movement, it focuses a lot on national parks and faraway places and protecting kind of unpeopled landscapes. But the nature that the people I met throughout Los Angeles talked about was like the tree outside your window, or I grew up in Latin America and there are mountains outside the window, so like the nature that surrounds everyday life. And then lots and lots of, so for people who were immigrants, particularly who immigrated as adults to the United States, they're very busy when they come, they're working really hard all the time, and then they say but when I go home, I just smell the air, the fresh air, and I see the trees, and I pick fruit from the trees and eat it, and I see that God created all of this and I love it, right? So lots of stories like that. And then a lot of stories of home-based conservation measures, so not wasting any food at all, wearing clothing that's been previously owned, hanging the clothes on the line to dry, all of these things that, on the one hand, yes, are rooted in poverty, but also it's not just poverty, right? It's an ethic, it's a value that's passed down from one generation to the next. So a lot of home-based conservation measures, but also with awareness of the connections of that to broader ecological issues.
It wasn't just driven by the poverty or the situation, right? These are choices they're making about how to live and how to care.
Exactly, and a lot of, because why are you doing, why are you doing, well, because it's the right thing to do. Why wouldn't I do it? It's kind of that's silly to go buy something when I have something right here. Why would I do that? And I will say, I spoke with some, basically the people that I spoke with are people who choose to worship in Spanish. I did about two focus groups in Spanish with people that primarily speak Spanish, and then most of the rest of them I did in English with bilingual churchgoers, so that's mostly second generation, but they're the population that continues to worship in Spanish, and they have a very different Catholicism than the English language Catholicism, that you have more third generation and beyond. But what I say is I didn't go to their houses. I met them at their churches or at a coffee shop or something like that. So I don't actually know how they were living, but they expressed values that were the ones that they'd inherited from their families. So I spoke with people that had professional jobs or very could afford to go buy new clothing, but were telling me they were raised wearing secondhand clothing. Why would I go buy new stuff? And there's perfectly good stuff here. So thrifting, and the Tupperware example came up at almost every site. And then the other one, I don't know if this is more LA based, but there is something about fruit trees. And so kind of this inside joke that that Latinos have fruit trees in their yards. And so there's one guy that told me a story about he took a bunch of his friends to his grandma's house, and his grandma lived in a neighborhood with predominantly white families. And when they pulled up the block, his friends all knew which one was his grandma's house because she had like 15 fruit trees in the yard. And I asked somebody about, because that's another thing that just came up over and over again. And finally I said to somebody like, he brought up the fruit trees. And I was like, why is everybody telling me about fruit trees? He said, well, it's like if you're Latino, but you don't have a fruit tree in your yard. It's kind of like you're not really Latino. So that was kind of just like a marker of Latino identity. That was kind of like this insider knowledge that they shared with me.
But also embedded in like home and family and place and environment. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. But so like backyard gardening, grandma maintains a garden, and
So this is one of the things that I connected with was because it was from Appalachia, and it's again not the same, but so many of these things are just like this. Like I remember not thinking of, when I've done research in environmentalism and I care about that stuff, but not thinking of myself as an environmentalist. But I did, like, we had woods outside our house. I remember playing in those things. There was all of these trails, and particular ones that would take you up to mountains where you could look over the sort of city. Not fruit trees, but everybody had a little kind of garden that you were sort of pulling stuff from, and it was kind of sort of expected. And that kind of concern for the environment that's embedded in neighbors and worldview and family life, I was like, that makes sense to me quite a bit. And so I was really cool to sort of see that, and also it's framing about who is included or considered to be people that care about the environment.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a pretty neat kind of connection as well. Yeah. There was in the other piece that made me sort of think about it too is that when you tell the story of like American Catholicism, for example, so often the narrative is about the Northeast and the migration of, you have an immigration story, but it's about Irish and Italian and Polish and Germans. What I find is that the other kind of piece of that story coming from the Southwest is often not put together, and it's a very, not totally different story, but there's different moves to it and a different kind of religiosity and piety that come into play. So that was also, I thought, as reading it as a theologian, I was like, oh, this is sort of interesting. This is another part of that sort of American Catholic history piece that oftentimes is not there.
I know there's research on, like the Spanish speakers are in the basement of the church or whatever, right? In a lot of parts of the country, but I mean, in LA you have entire, there might be a parish where they have English language mass once in the weekend and 5 services in Spanish or something like that. So there's a huge, and like our through the Archdiocese, the Spanish language ministry and this giant Spanish language young adult ministry is it's huge. It's everywhere, and it is the social life for a lot of young people.
That's really sort of cool. I wanted to sort of bring that up because I wanted to ask you about, which is my kind of last question of the thing, is about the future of higher education. And I think about it, I've been thinking about it for a while because I just feel like higher ed's changing and I don't know where it's going, but the grounds are sort of shifting, and not just, I know there's recent stuff, but I think this has been coming for like the last like decade and a half, where small schools are kind of struggling. People are trying to figure out what's the cost versus the sort of value, or the reasons people sort of, all of those things are kind of shifting. And I really think higher education is wonderful. So I'm trying to like imagine what it might sort of look like. So I wanted to ask you about what's your thoughts on the future of higher education or Catholic higher education, but like from Hispanic serving places or from environmental places, or if you have another one that you want to do. So.
Well, no, because I've thought about this question since you kind of gave me a heads up.
That it's coming,
and I think like coming from Cal State Northridge and working with the population we work with, it's just, it shows the importance of higher education as a complete life changer, right? So I think one of the reasons why working at CSUN is so rewarding is because it really is the difference between 2 different life paths. And so, we talk about our delightful friends down the road, UCLA, right? Their students, for the most part, they have a diversity of students also, but at a lot of places, the majority of the students are on the path to success. Like, I mean, for me, like I was always going to go to college. I was always going to go to grad school. Like, that was the plan. That was my life path, right?
I joke sometimes with I didn't know you couldn't go to college. My parents always said that. When do you go to college? And then when I graduated high school and a bunch of people didn't go to college, I was like, you're allowed to do that?
Exactly.
So that's a different track.
Right, exactly. But with our students, it's the difference between 2 very, very different lives. And So yeah, I mean, I think that shows, the importance of higher ed, if you're going to be able to, get into a professional job and, rise to the middle class. I mean, that's what Cal State Northridge has made a bunch of the lists for, So anyway, it's a really rewarding place to be, and it's, I think working with that population of students, they're just really eager to learn. They're very respectful. They come knowing, they see faculty members very respectfully, like that we actually have something to offer. I feel like, in grad school, I was with a population that was much more privileged, and it was kind of like, I was kind of like their servant and, helping them, whatever, get there. But this is like, the students are very happy to be there, but they're also bringing these very distinct life traditions. And that's kind of why I wrote the book, is to help uplift the knowledge that they already have. So like they come, and I think this is what I'm getting at. They're very respectful of higher ed and their professors and, scientific knowledge and everything, to the extent that they don't necessarily recognize the wealth of knowledge from the communities that they came from their parents and their grandparents that didn't have the opportunity to pursue higher education, right? And so I think the really cool thing about Hispanic serving institutes and places that are serving first generation college students is the ability to bridge those knowledges and kind of uplift the knowledge that they bring with them and help them, bringing completely new perspectives to how we're seeing the world and how we're solving problems, right? To be able to bring this wealth of knowledge, like, to the problems we're trying to solve, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of my kind of, theories, is like, it's places like, one of my attractions to St. Mary's, I should say, is that if you're going to try to figure out what the future of higher ed looks like, it's probably places like these that are doing something kind of different and imaginative and responding to different communities that are bringing different kinds of wisdom or different kinds of ideas about how things should work. Like it's a fruitful place for thinking ahead. And so,
absolutely. And I mean, I think I explained, like my entire paradigm has shifted as a result of working with these students, right, that have changed my complete outlook. And so I think it completely enriches our scholarship and just the way we are in the world. Yeah,
I think so. It was a colleague of mine, Jerry Pollo, talked about Hispanic. He was talking about St. Mary's mainly, but he was talking about the ways in which you can sort of serve. He talked about like there's the opportunity thing, which is like the jobs and the professional sort of piece, which is really important, what sort of students want. But it's also, then there's also this kind of serving piece where you're enabling them to sort of advance their own thinking and their own sort of, and their own perspectives there as well. And then there's even an advocacy piece where you're like sort of upholding them as sort of moving forward. And he's like, well, St. Mary's does some of those well, some of those better sometimes, and some of those better at other times. But trying to think all of those sort of different dimensions. And they are like transformative for the students, but then transformative for us and the school and higher ed, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. I think that's well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.